Good morning, everyone. Why don't we start with a word of prayer? Father God, just thanking you for another day here today, God. We know we're not promised another second here, God, and we just pray that through you we live each moment intentionally, God, putting you first in all we do. We just love you and praise you, God. We pray for those who need healing, those who are facing some life challenges, new adventures now, God. We just pray for your guidance over them. Amen. Does anyone have any announcements this morning?
Good morning, everybody. Just a reminder, every staff breakfast, I'm going to be doing a real quick mini training on training tips on retention. So real quick, we're going to go through this week's this staff breakfast training. And so I'm going to, first of all, it's either going to be Nathan or myself that will be up here. So we're going to be alternating staff breakfasts for this. And real quick, the training tips are going to be on why, who, and what of retention. The why, and we're going to go over those three real quick every staff breakfast. The why of retention: quality of care, program model, integrity, and fidelity, and then overall indicator for how we are doing. And that's kind of really what I believe encompasses the why of why are we talking about this. It's an overall indicator of how we're doing. Each staff breakfast, we're going to focus on a different area. So this area, the who of retention, will be interns. The what of retention in that area. So 3 specific examples for interns, and I want everybody to think about when I'm speaking about specific areas, or when Nathan is, we're not just talking about certain interns for this example, or we won't be talking about certain people within departments. This, again, is for everyone. So in general terms, for interns, we're going to be talking about the what of retention. First of all, we want to understand how to become aware of and understand our personal conflict response. So again, the indicator of how we're doing in regards to the students and the patients in the program. How are we doing with them? And so we understand that there's lots of conflict in this process. And so part of this process, with interns specifically, is that we should always try to become aware and understand of our personal conflict response. How do we react and respond to conflict? Number 2, respond to conflict with patience and grace. And this is a biblical concept. A lot of these retention principles will definitely have biblical underlying. So Ephesians 4:2, be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. And then number 3, if a specific response to a situation is causing the conflict to intensify, then this is key in the beginning, because we're all growing in this. We're all learning how to kind of understand this. If it's causing to intensify, that's an indicator that you need to disengage from that situation and then reach out to a supervisor or team lead. And that's our training tip for today. Thank you very much.
Okay, any other announcements or anything? No. Okay, we're going to begin. Today I'm going to be doing a training on harassment and inappropriate conduct. I could focus on the law. I actually had a whole other presentation prepared, but I scrapped that because I think that instead of focusing on the law, it's important that we focus overall on harassing behavior and just prohibited behaviors in general, instead of trying to make you all legal experts. So why does this matter? This matters because, first of all, we're a Christian ministry, right? So our core values are based off of the Bible. The Bible tells us to love one another. We need to treat each other with respect. Obviously, we want to have a culture here that's inclusive. We want to attract and retain new employees here as well. We want to prevent harm, of course. And above all else, everyone has a right to freedom from harassing behavior. And the obvious thing is that it's illegal. So when we're talking about harassment, like I said, I'm not going to focus on the legal aspects. I think it's important that we focus on a continuum of behavior. So there are many types of behaviors that can lead to harassment, and they go from the least offensive all the way to the most egregious. So I've included some examples up there. So first would be things that are generally not offensive at all. Comments about your hair or your outfit looking nice. You know, I got a fancy new haircut last week and some people said my hair looked nice. That was not offensive. They were correct. That was not a problem. The next would be this general gray area that can be awkward or maybe mildly offensive. It's going to depend on the circumstances that the people are in. It's going to be comments that could be viewed to be unfavorable to women. So say there's a bunch of guys standing around and a woman walks up and they say, "Oh, we can't talk freely anymore because you women are around." That's a little offensive. Next up would be comments that are generally disrespectful, offensive, and harassing in nature. These are insensitive to gender or they're superior in nature. They're usually jokes about pregnancy or family life, causing women to not be able to work good enough, or jokes about a woman's intellect or comments about a woman's physical body. And then the last category would be those that are blatant sexual harassment, things like inappropriate touch, looking a woman up and down suggestively, propositioning, or repeated sexual harassing comments. So decisions about which category of behavior falls into are going to depend on the situation, the history of the relationship between the people, the tone of delivery, and if there are any nonverbal behaviors along with the comments. So is someone making physical gestures while making some of these comments? The important thing to remember is that if you tolerate one behavior, it's going to lead to worse behavior. So tolerating disrespect is going to lead to harassing, which is going to lead to harassment. When we're talking about sexual harassment, this is going to broadly cover incidents that can be, of course, sexual in nature, gender-based, and pregnancy-related, et cetera. Of course, all employees at all of our centers are bound by our sexual and other harassment policy and are expected to follow these policies. And while we're focusing on sexual harassment towards women, we do want to note that sexual harassment can absolutely happen towards men as well. And harassment in general can cover any of those protected classes: disability, race, ethnicity, gender, etc. So what is our policy on harassment? I wish Amber were here. I do not have a fun little meme for you guys, but here is our sexual harassment policy. I'm not going to read the whole thing for you, but it generally opens up with a general intent statement that states why this policy exists, why it's important to the organization. What's important for you to see in here would be A, this policy applies to all electronic communication. So that can be things including your email, your text messages, social media, etc. Any interactions that employees have with one another on these platforms are recoverable and can be used in an investigation. So you may say, well, that's my personal phone. You don't have a right to my text messages. Well, if you send sexually harassing text messages to Julie and she presents them to us, we absolutely do have a right to that and to use that in an investigation, and we will. Next, you should know that this policy applies to both the workplace, so each of our premises and locations, and off-site locations. Anytime you're representing the organization, this policy applies. And then C, it's going to apply also to any work-related business meetings, travel, social events, and potentially events that don't have anything to do with work. And you might say, well, why is that? That's because, once again, we're a Christian ministry. So we have a code of conduct, which I did a training on before for everyone, that's based off of our biblical values and the behavioral expectations we have for staff. So conduct that you display, even at a social event that's not related to work, that can compromise the integrity of the mission or the reputation of the organization, can be an issue that we might have to take action on. And of course, the policy applies to non-employees like your agency staff, vendors, contractors, et cetera. So this first paragraph is the actual legal definition for what legal sexual harassment or harassment in general is. It's creating an intimidating, hostile, offensive work environment or adversely affects someone's ability to perform their job. The second paragraph is what's really important. So I'm just going to read the beginning. The following behaviors are prohibited even if not unlawful in and of themselves. So things that like slurs, name calling, jokes, anything that you're doing that violates an individual's protected class is prohibited. So if you're making jokes about someone's race, jokes about someone's sex, they may not be unlawful, but they're still prohibited in the organization. And of course, employees are reminded that there is no First Amendment right to privacy in the workplace. So we've kind of gone over what harassment is. So how do you report harassment? You promptly need to report the matter to your supervisor. Alternatively, if you're not comfortable going to your supervisor or the issues about your supervisor, you need to go to Human Resources or you can go to any of the VP level staff. Supervisors or managers, I use these titles throughout the presentation, but this is going to be anyone in a leadership position, and I'm going to get more into that. Any leaders must immediately report the claim to the Human Resources Department. Leaders have a duty to report potential harassment, even if it's contrary to the wishes of the person who's making the complaint. And also staff who, as a bystander, witness or otherwise learn of potential harassment, you have a duty to report also. And once again, that's regardless of whether the person wants it reported or not. And we're going to get more into depth about why that exists. It's important that you know that if someone does complain about any sexual or other harassment, they are protected against unlawful retaliation. So when we're talking about witnesses or bystanders, who are we talking about? We're talking about everyone. Everyone must report all complaints of unlawful harassment or unacceptable conduct. That's whether you witness it firsthand or you hear about it from a third party, you have to report it. If you're unsure, report it anyway. Who do you report it to? Your supervisor, HR, or any of the VP staff. And when do you report it? Immediately. We have to take immediate action on these claims. They're very serious. So everyone, once again, must report complaints, even if the person asks you to keep it confidential. So how do you handle that? You say, you go, I go, or we go. But we are going to report this because this is a policy and we have to report this. Failure to report puts both the organization at risk and you individually at risk for legal action. Now, when we're talking about leadership, that comes with a set of responsibilities, so it's really important that you guys pay attention here. So there are court rulings and anti-harassment laws that apply to anyone with power. These categories are very broadly defined. So that means anyone who has any type of leadership position. So at our organization, that can be coordinators, supervisors, managers, directors, et cetera. Anyone who's in a position of power, the court has ruled has a duty to report. Also, the courts are going to say you must respond in the moment to any type of harassment, even if no one complains. So that's a little scary to hear, but we're going to walk you through how to handle this. So leaders can be liable for inaction to prevent ongoing harassment. The courts have said that if you were silent about it, then you condoned it. So a wrong way to handle that would be re-victimization. Say there's 3 men and 1 woman in a conversation. You don't want to say, oh, did that just upset you as a woman? That puts her in a really awkward position that if she was offended, you've now just re-victimized her because she's a woman and she's offended. Another wrong way would be paternalism. You wouldn't want to say, hey, that's not okay to say because Janet's a woman. You make it seem like if Janet wasn't there, then it would have been okay for those people to say those comments. So what is the right way to respond as a leader? The right way to simply say, hey, let's not go down that road anymore. The conversation stops here. Or, hey, let's stop that. Let's go talk, or let's talk later. You don't need to go into detail. You just need to stop the conversation. And the courts have ruled that that is enough to show that we tried to prevent ongoing harassment. So leaders, how do you respond to a complaint if someone does report this to you? The important thing for you to know is that you do not have a responsibility to make a decision regarding the complaint. You're not deciding whether it's factual or not. You just have to refer it on to human resources. What's important is that you do not judge the complainant if someone does report a complaint to you. And that would go for anyone in general. You can simply just say, thank you for coming. I'm going to report this to HR immediately for follow-up. That's it. That's all you have to say. Everyone needs to be careful of in-the-moment responses. You don't want to say things like, geez, that doesn't sound like Mark, or that does sound like Mark. You want to keep your opinion to yourself. You simply just want to say, I'm going to report this. You can let them know that we take these things seriously, or you can simply just say that you're going to report it, that HR will do an investigation, and that they will be in touch. So here's a really important section, this last section here. When you're reporting any of these complaints to Human Resources, do not email me the complaint. You can send me an email and say that you need to speak with me immediately, but you must call me, because emails are evidence when it comes to court cases. And a lot of times people end up putting their opinion in there and things that are not fact. So if you get any type of serious complaint, you can email and ask me to get in touch with you, but what I really want you to do is call me right away. And I don't want your opinion. I want you to say, oh, guess who complained again? Or I don't believe this is true. Just tell me the facts, what the person told you, and then we'll take it from there. Now, we did talk about before that if someone does make a complaint of sexual harassment or any harassment in general, that they are protected from non-retaliation. So what does that mean? That means that we will ensure that no retaliation or adverse action is taken against that person simply because they made a complaint. So what will happen is that HR will do an investigation and determine the facts. So retaliation, here are some of the prohibited actions. Things like firing, demoting, suspending the person, changing their job duties significantly, or bad-mouthing them or taking other actions. So it's important that you know that, say you're a supervisor and someone makes a claim of sexual harassment or any harassment against you, and say they decide that they're going to stop performing their job duties altogether. You are not to discipline them without coming to HR, because I'm going to work with our legal team and ensure that any disciplinary action is protected and that we're following everything we need to so that we can show that we have not taken any adverse action against this person. And we will take action against you as a leader if you don't follow those protocols and you decide to go rogue and you're going to discipline this person on your own after they have claimed you've sexually harassed them. So anytime we're getting a complaint, many of you guys may remember this from orientation, HR investigates any types of complaints we get, whether it's unlawful or not. We're going to determine the facts of the case. We're going to determine if harassment happened. And we're going to see if there's evidence for any of those types of behaviors on that continuum of behavior we talked about. And then we're going to take corrective action if there was something negative that happened. And our corrective action is going to be prompt and proportionate to where that situation was on that continuum. So things can range from education, you know, someone made a comment that was inappropriate. We might educate them about why that was inappropriate, regardless of whether it was unlawful or not. We're going to educate them on that. And it can go all the way up to termination, of course, if something was unlawful and there was blatant harassment or anything like that. Factors that are going to determine the corrective action are going to include the nature of the incident, whether that person was in a position of power, and if there are any prior warnings against that person. Power is going to magnify the seriousness of any wrongs. So next I want to talk about intimate relationships. You would be wise to disclose if you are in an intimate relationship with another employee for several reasons, and we're going to go through some of them. Generally, just so we're all on the same page, we do have policies on proper interactions with interns. Employees are not permitted to date or have a personal relationship with interns in any manner. The relationship is strictly to be that of mentor and mentoree, and that's it. Of course, as a Christian organization, we're going to encourage Christian dating principles, and this is going to be especially important if you work in our long-term program, or if you're in any position where you're directly overseeing or mentoring our long-term students. Why is that? And that's because many of these individuals who have come with a history of addiction have engaged in unhealthy sexual relationships. We, as a Christian organization, are trying to teach them how to live a new life in Christ and how to have Christian relationships. So how can we do that if our staff can't even comply with that, the staff who are mentoring them? So you guys have to be held accountable so that we can be good representatives of our culture to the students. There are also some other issues that can happen when you are engaging in an intimate relationship with another employee. There is the potential for harassment. So say you're in a relationship and that ends and someone still continues to pursue the other person. That person can allege that there is harassment now because they're not interested anymore. Of course, there can be a conflict of interest. You cannot supervise someone you were dating. You could be, someone could allege that there is favoritism. If you control anything or have any oversight with that other person, you control resources or something like that, people can allege that you are favoring that person because you are dating them. And of course, there's something called undue influence. And this can be an issue for any leader that is in a position with any employee or intern. Undue influence basically means that the person in a position of power exerted some sort of control over the other person to make them do or act in a way that they normally would not have. So, they made you steal money. They made you do something like this because they said they would fire you if not. That's what undue influence is. Next, let's just go over some basic employee education. It's important that everyone knows that we all have the right to be free from harassment, the right to be free from inappropriate behavior. You do have a responsibility to speak up about issues. We can't correct what we don't know is happening. You have to let us know if these things are happening. The general rule that you should be using when you're thinking about whether you should report something is, what would a reasonable person think? This is what the courts actually use when they're determining if something is sexual harassment or not. Would a general person, a reasonable person, think that that is harassing or harassment? Would they think that it's harassment for you to say their hair looks nice? Probably not. But would they say that it is harassing for you to continue to talk about their long legs and how nice their long legs work? Well, that could happen. So that's what you need to be thinking about. A lot of policies usually say that they want you to have direct confrontation with someone if you feel that they are harassing you. Of course, we do generally recommend that we follow the Matthew 18 conflict resolution principles, but that's not a requirement. So if you feel like someone is making harassing or offensive comments to you, you do not have to talk to them if you don't want to. You can talk to a supervisor or to HR and we can handle the situation. So I'm going to wrap this up. We are trying to promote a good culture here, and that starts at the top, but it goes all the way down, and every employee plays a role in that. Once again, while harassment is predominantly targeted towards women, it absolutely can involve any protected class. And as a wrap up, leaders must take action to stop any harassing comments in the moment. Everyone has a responsibility to report, and HR can do a lot, but we can't do everything. I do not own our culture here. We all create what the culture is. We all play a role in that. You guys decide what types of comments and behavior you're going to tolerate on a daily basis. Above all else, be civil, be respectful, and be godly. And I wanted to reflect on this verse, 1 Peter 2:17. Show proper respect to everyone, love the family of believers, fear God, and honor authority. If you have any questions, here are some of the references I used, and I will be available after this for any questions and answers. Thank you, guys.